How to become a qualified welding educators. Explained specification for the qualification of welding educators. Abstract. This specification defines the requirements and program to qualify welding educators. The qualification of a welding educator is determined by a combination of education and experience, satisfactory demonstration of welding, preference, performance qualification test, and written and practical examination. The written examination demonstrates the educator's knowledge of welding processes, welding discontinuities, destructive testing, non-destructive testing methods, safety practice, welding metallurgy, weld symbols, basic arithmetics, codes, and other standards. Forward. This forward is not a part of AWS B5.5 2000 specification for the qualification of welding educators, but it is included for information purposes only. The Qualification and Certification Committee of the American Welding Society was formed in 1973. AWS QC5 AWS standard for certification of welding educators was first published in 1991. In 1996, the Qualification and Certification Committee was separated in two separate entities. The B5 Committee on Qualification was formed as a technical committee and under the direction of Technical Activities Committee TAC, and the Certification Committee remained as a standing committee. The B5 Committee on Qualification creates qualification standards from which a central certification agency or employer may base a certification program upon. These standards supersede that part of AWS QC5 that concerns qualification requirements to be met by a welding educator. The AWS certification process is covered in AWS QC5. The purpose of this standard is to set qualification requirements for welding educators. Individuals seeking qualification are required to demonstrate that they have adequate skills, knowledge, and experience in the field of welding education. Scope. This specification establishes the attributes required for determine the qualification of welding educators. In the qualification process, a welding educator shall be capable of demonstrating skills and knowledge of welding processes and fabrication principles. The welding educator must provide evidence of their teaching skills. It shall be the policy responsibility of the employer to determine that a person is capable of performing the duties involved in their welding educator assignment. This specification is intended to supplement the requirements of an employer or of local, state, or national regulations. It shall not be construed as a preemption of the employer's responsibility for the work or for the performance of the work. Hence, it is the responsibility of the employer to determine the welding educator's qualifications other than those stated in 1.2 above and confirm the capability of the welding educators to perform the duties required by the education organization for the job function assigned to the welding educator. Furthermore, this standard is not intended to supersede, replace, or contradict the local, state, or national regulations governing the licensing of teachers, of instructors, that the exemptions, if any, permitted by such regulation with regard to teaching or instructing welding without a license. terminology guideline. As used in this specification, the word shall denote a requirement, the word should denote a guideline or recommendation, and the word may denote a choice. There are a lot of normative references for the welding educators, but AWS A 3.0 standard welding terms and definitions, ANSI Z49.1 safety in welding, cutting, and allied processes, AWS QC 1 standard for AWS certification of welding inspector, AWS QC 7 standard for AWS certified welders, AWS B2.1 standard for welding procedure and performance qualification, including B2.1 welding procedure specifications as applicable. Qualification levels. There are three levels of welding educators. These levels are defined as Senior Welding Educator (SWE), a person meeting the qualification requirements of 6.1 and Section 7. Welding Educator (WE), a person meeting the qualification requirements of 6.2 and Section 7. Associate Welding Educator (AWE), a person meeting the qualification requirements of 6.3 and Section 7. Definitions. All terms used herein are defined by AWS A 3.0 standard welding terms and definitions. Exceptions within the context of this standard are listed below with their definitions. Acceptance criteria. The specified limits placed on characteristics of an item or process defined in codes or other standards. AWS, the American Welding Society. Certificate, the document issued to the applicant on successful completion of the requirements for certification. Certification, the act of determining, verifying, and testing, is written to the qualification of personnel in conformance to specified requirements. Certification Committee, Certification Committee of the American Welding Society. Fabrication, the act of constructing or manufacturing to a standard. Inspection, the act of examining or measuring to verify whether an item or activity conforms to a standard. Professionalism, the practice of conducting oneself in an appropriate manner. Qualification Committee, the Committee on Qualification of the American Welding Society. Qualification, process of demonstrating whether an entity is capable of fulfilling specified requirements. Qualified, status given on an entity when the capability of fulfilling specified requirement has been demonstrated. Training institution, an organization that trains people for employment in the field of welding. This includes organizations open to the public or in-house training organizations who train only their own employees. Verification, the act of reviewing, inspecting, testing, checking, auditing, or otherwise determining and documenting whether items, processes, services, or documents conform to specified requirements. Welding. As used in this specification, welding shall be construed to include bracing. Welding Educator, an education specialist whose duties are to educate others in the theories and practical methods of welding. Note, whether the term welding educator is used throughout this document, it includes those individuals whose title to welder trainer, welding instructor, or welding teacher. Weldment, an assembly whose component parts are joined by welding. Functions, skills, and knowledge. The welding educator has the responsibility to direct and perform operations associated with welder training and classroom instruction. Each employer is responsible for defining the specific duties of a welding educator in the respective place of employment. The welding educator shall be able to demonstrate the capability of performing the task defined in this specification. It is strongly recommended that the welding educator instruct welding safety in accordance with ANSI Z49.1 Safety in Welding, Cutting and Allied Processes and Occupational Safety and Health Administrative Rules as published in the Code of Federal Regulations CFR and other approved safety practices. The function and required skills and knowledge of a welding educator include but not limited to welding codes, drawings, and specification. The welding educator shall be capable of reading and explaining typical welding codes, drawings, and specification. This requires knowledge of welding symbols and of welding definitions and terminology. Base material and welding materials. The welding educator shall be capable of instructing students on base materials and their weldability characteristics and on welding filler metal types and characteristics. Welding equipment. The welding educator shall be capable of conducting instruction on the characteristics and operation of various power sources and related equipment, provides basic safety instruction on the use of the equipment, troubleshoots and demonstrates the proper use of equipment. Welding skills. The welding educator shall be capable of demonstrating competency of welding skills per the AWSQC 7 standard or equivalent. The welding educator shall demonstrate the welding processes defined in the section 7 knowledge and performance requirements. Review of welding instructional plan. The welding educator shall demonstrate competence in the review of written welding instructional materials to determine that they comply with the appropriate code or other standards. The welding educator shall be capable of writing new welding instructional or lesson plans and shall be able to perform test methods required to evaluate welding students. Evaluation of welder training. The welding educator shall be capable of evaluating at the educational experience of the welding students to verify that it meets the desired outcomes. Inspection. The welding educator shall be capable of performing visual inspections of their in process and completed weldments to confirm that they comply with the specified acceptance criteria. Reports. The welding educator shall be capable of preparing written reports of the reviews, inspection results, and performance evaluations. Education and experience requirements. Senior Welding Educator (SWE). In order to qualify as a senior welding educator, the following requirements shall be met. A senior welding educator shall be a high school graduate or hold a state or military approved high school equivalency diploma. Shall have no less than 10 years experience as a welding educator who has conducted both welding theory classes and practical weld shop training C 6.1.7. Shall have no less than 5 years experience in an occupational function in the welding of assemblies fabricated to a code or specification. shall be familiar with understanding and be capable of explaining and or performing the following joining and cutting processes and any other processes required by local industry. Refer to AWS A 3.0 standard welding terms and definitions. SMA, Gamma, TBPSC, GTAW, SAW, soldering, CSCA, FCAW, OFC, OFW, mechanical cutting, shall be able to interpret and develop welding instructional plans as required by industry, shall be thoroughly familiar with the capable of performing the duties described in section 5, functions, skill and knowledge. Alternative to 6.1.2, with supporting documentation, copies of transcripts which specified credit hours of training, quarter hours or semester hours may be substituted as follows. A maximum of 2 years of post high school education may be substituted for any equal number of years of the required 10 years teaching experience provided due studies are relevant to the skill and teaching technology of welding. There shall be no substitution for occupational experience. Credited is as given as follows: associate or higher degree, 2 year maximum if the degree is in welding technology or welding engineering, technical school, trade, vocational courses, 2 years maximum exclusively for successfully completed courses in a curriculum that can be or could be applied beyond above. Welding Educator WE. In order to qualify as a welding educator, the following requirements shall be met. A welding educator shall be a high school graduate or hold a state or military approved high school equivalency diploma, shall have no less than 5 years experience as a welding educator who has conducted both welding theory classes and practical weld shop training. See 6.2.6. Shall have no less than 3 years of experience in an occupational function in the welding of assemblies fabricated to a code or specification, shall be able to explain and demonstrate the welding and cutting processes to be taught, shall be thoroughly familiar with the capable of performing the duties described in section 5, function, skills and knowledge. Alternatives to 6.2.2 with supporting documentation, e.g., copies of transcripts which specify credit hours of training, quarter hours, or semester hours, may be substituted as follows. A minimum of 2 years of post high school education may be substituted for an equal number of years of the required 5 years teaching experience provided studies are relevant to the skill and technology of welding. There shall be no substitution for occupational experience. Credit as follow: associate higher degree, 2 year maximum if the degree is in welding technology or welding engineering, technical school, trade, vocational courses, 2 years maximum exclusively for successfully completed courses in a curriculum that can be or could be applied to one above. Associate Welding Educator AWE. In order to qualify as an associate welding educator, the following requirements shall be met. An associate welding educator shall be a high school graduate or hold a state or military approved high school equivalency diploma. Shall have no less than 2 years experience as a welding educator who has coordinated with welding theory classes and practical welding shop training. See 6.3.6. Shall have no less than 1 year's experience in an occupational function in welding assemblies fabricated to a code or specification. Shall be able to explain and demonstrate welding and cutting processes to be taught. shall be thoroughly familiar with the capable of performing the duties described in section 5, functions, skills and knowledge. Alternatives to 6.3.2 supporting documentation, receive copies of transcripts, specify credit hours of training, quarter hours or semester hours may be substituted as follows. A minimum of 1 year of post-high school education may be substituted for an equal number of years of the required 2 years teaching experience provided studies are relevant to the skills and technology of training, welding. There shall be no substitution for occupational experience. Credit is given as follows: associate or high degree once 1 year maximum if the degree is in welding technology or welding engineering. Technical, school, trade, vocational courses, 1 year maximum exclusively for successfully completed courses in a curriculum data that can be or could be applied to an above. Knowledge and performance requirements. The SWE, WE or AWE shall demonstrate knowledge of fundamental welding principles, including but not limited to welding processes, weld discontinuities, destructive and non-destructive test methods, safety, basic welding metallurgy, welding symbols, and basic arithmetics. The demonstration of welding knowledge shall be written examination. A minimum score of 72% of the CWE closed book examination or equivalent shall be considered adequate demonstration of knowledge for these requirements. The SWE, WE and AWE shall demonstrate practical welding inspection skills and knowledge, including determining qualification standard from a code or specification. An SWE, WE or AWE shall demonstrate these skills and knowledge by passing the CWI practical examination or equivalent with the minimum score of 72%. The SWE shall demonstrate proficiency in the following welding processes by performing qualification. SWE 1, SMAW 6G AWS B 2.1 1201 Joint 1 or equivalent as determined by employer. SWE2 GMAW 6G pipe Annex A SWE2 or equivalent as determined by employer. SWE3 GMAW FCAW 6G pipe Annex A SWE3 or equivalent as determined by employer. SWE4 Qatar 6G pipe AWS B 2.1 1207 Joint 1 or equivalent as determined by employer. The WE shall demonstrate proficiency in the following welding processes by performance qualification. WE1 SMAW 3G and 4G plate AWS B 2.1001 Joint 1 or equivalent as determined by employer. WE2 GMAW 3G or 4G plate Annex A WE2 or equivalent as determined by employer. WE3 for FCAW 3G and 4G plate AWS B 2.1 1020 Joint 1 or 3 equivalent as determined by employer. WE4 GTAW 3G and 4G plate AWS B 2.1008 Joint 1 or 2 or equivalent as determined by employer. AWE shall demonstrate proficiency in the following welding processes by performance equivalent performance qualification. AWE SMAW 1G plate AWS B 2.1001 Joint 1 or equivalent as determined by employer. AWE2 GMAW 1G plate Annex A AWE2 or equivalent as determined by employer. AWE3 FCAW 1G plate, AWS B2.1 12020 joint 1 or 3 or equivalent as determined by employer. AWE4 GTAW 1G plate, AWS B2.1 008 joints 1 or 2 or equivalent as determined by employer. The SWE, WE or AWE applicants shall perform the required welding performance qualification test at an accredited test facility or any other test facility provided the required qualification test is conducted and evaluated by a current certified welding inspector. Performance qualification test for SWE, WE purposes only shall be tested and evaluated in accordance to the latest edition of AWS B2.1 specification for welding edge procedure and performance qualification, and shall be valid for a 4 years period. After this period, a retest of all performance qualification tests shall be required as per applicable documents. Period of effectiveness and continued competence. The SWE, AWE qualification shall be valid for a 4-year period unless there is reason to question the ability of the educator to competently instruct or demonstrate the process they instruct. In these instances, the SWE, AWE shall demonstrate their continued competence by examination or and performance qualification. Examination structure and body of knowledge. Examination basis documents. The examination questions shall be taken from and shall be answerable from the body of knowledge in the following reference information. Number AWS 2.4 standard symbols for welding, brazing and non-destructive examination. Applicability SWE, WE, AWE. AWS A3.0 standard welding terms and definitions. AWS B4.0 standard methods for mechanical testing of welds. AWS B1.10 guide for non-destructive inspection of welds. AWS B1.11 guide for visual inspection of welds. ANSI Z49.1 safety in welding, cutting and allied processes. AWS B5.1 specification for the qualification of welding inspectors. AWS QC1 standard for AWS certification of welding inspectors. AWS WITT welding inspection technology. AWS WHB 1.8 welding technology welding handbook volume 1. AWS HB 2.8 welding processes welding handbook volume 2. AWS CM94 certification manual for welding inspectors. These are all applicable for SWE, WE and AWE. Performance basis documents. In performance of the welding educator duties, welding educator shall have knowledge of the following documents. AWS D1.1 structural welding code steel. AWS B5.5 specification for the qualification of welding educators. AWS EG 2.0 guide for training and qualification of welding personnel entry-level welders. AWS EG 3.0 guide for the training and qualification of welding personnel level 2 advanced welder. AWS G 4.0 guide for the training and qualification of welding personnel expert level welders. AWS QC 10 specification for qualification of and certification of entry level welders. AWS QC 11 specification for qualification and certification for level 2 advanced welders. AWS QC 12 specification for qualification and certification for level 3 expert welder. AWS B2.1 standard for welding procedure and performance qualification. These are all applicable for SWE, WE, AWE. Annex A, Performance Qualification Welding Procedure Specification. This is a SWE2 Welding Procedure Specification. SWE3 Welding Procedure Specification. WE2 Welding Procedure Specification. And A2 AEW Welding Procedure Specification. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe.